The stadium didn't explode all at once. It built up slowly, like pressure inside a sealed room with no release. One pitch. One reaction. One stare that lingered too long. And then everything snapped. Shohei Ohtani had seen aggressive pitching before. He had seen inside heat. He had seen pitchers try to disrupt his timing, his rhythm, his confidence. But what was happening in this game against the Rockies felt different. It wasn't just about pitching inside. It felt coordinated. Intentional in rhythm, if not in rule. A pattern that everyone in the stadium began to notice but nobody wanted to say out loud. At first, it was subtle. A pitch just under the hands. Then another brushing the inside edge. Then a fastball that sent Ohtani stepping back hard from the plate. The crowd started reacting before anyone in the dugouts did. Fans don't need slow-motion replay to feel tension. They feel intent. And tonight, they felt something building. Ohtani adjusted his stance. Reset his grip. Looked back toward the mound with that calm expression he always carries, the one that doesn't give away frustration even when the game is trying to provoke it out of him. But even calm players have limits. And the Rockies seemed determined to test exactly where that limit was. The Dodgers dugout noticed it first. Players leaned over the railing. Coaches exchanged quick words. You don't need a broadcast explanation to understand when a pitcher is attacking a zone in a way that feels personal. And as the innings continued, the tension stopped being just about Ohtani. It became about respect. About response. About how long a superstar can be pushed before the game itself pushes back. Then came the moment that changed everything. Another pitch. Inside again. This one is not just close, but sharp enough to send Ohtani off balance. The ball didn't hit him, but it didn't need to. The message was already loud enough. Ohtani stepped out of the box slowly, his eyes locked toward the mound. Not anger. Don't panic. Just focus. The kind of focus that usually comes right before something big happens. And that's when the first words were exchanged. It started between the catcher and Ohtani. A quick exchange. Nothing that would normally make headlines. But the Rockies dugout reacted immediately. A coach stepped out. Then another voice from inside the bench area. Something was said that nobody in the stadium could clearly hear, but everyone could feel. The Dodgers didn't wait. Players stepped out of the dugout almost instantly. Not running. Not charging. But moving with purpose. That slow, dangerous kind of movement that signals things are no longer under control. The umpire crew saw it immediately and rushed toward the plate area. Hands went up. Voices rose. The game stopped being a game. Ohtani stood still near the batter's box, helmet still on, bat lowered slightly. He wasn't the one escalating anything. But he was at the center of it. As always. Because when Ohtani is involved, everything becomes magnified. Then came the moment nobody expected. A Rockies coach, standing near the top of the dugout steps, made a comment toward the field. It wasn't loud enough for microphones to fully capture in real time, but nearby players heard it clearly. And their reaction was instant. The Dodgers bench surged forward another step. The Rockies responded. And suddenly, the distance between both teams was gone. The umpire shouted for separation, but it was too late. Words had already turned into movement. Movement turned into confrontation. And confrontation turned into chaos. A Rockies player stepped toward the baseline, pointing toward the Dodgers dugout. A Dodgers player answered back immediately. Gloves dropped. Not thrown, but dropped with that unmistakable finality that says the next moment will not be verbal. And then it happened. The first shove. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a push between two players near home plate. But that single contact was enough to ignite everything that had been building since the first inside pitch. Within seconds, more players entered the space. The dugouts emptied. Coaches ran in trying to separate bodies, not realizing they were now part of the collision themselves. The stadium erupted. Not in cheer. Not in books. But in a collective roar of disbelief. Ohtani was pulled slightly backward by a Dodgers coach, but he didn't leave the scene immediately. He stayed close enough to see everything unfolding. His expression never changed dramatically, but the tension in his posture was visible. This wasn't about him starting a fight. It was about his presence becoming the center of one. Security began rushing in from multiple directions. Umpires tried to regain control, but there were too many moving parts. Too many voices. Too many emotions colliding in real time. Players were shouting over each other. Coaches were pulling teammates back. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the original baseball game had completely disappeared. The Rockies' approach, whatever strategy or mindset they had entered the game with, had now completely backfired. What may have started as aggressive pitching or psychological pressure had turned into something much bigger. Because once a dugout loses control of its tone, the game stops being about tactics. It becomes about pride. And pride never stays quiet in baseball. The broadcast crew struggled to keep up. Cameras zoomed in on separate clusters of players. One group near home plate. Another near the first base line. Another forming near the mound. It wasn't one fight. It was multiple confrontations happening at once, like ripples spreading from a single stone thrown into a lake. Then came the moment that defined the entire incident. A Rockies coach was seen being physically separated and pushed back toward the dugout entrance by officials after continuing to argue with players and umpires. The ejection call came immediately. No hesitation. No review. Just a direct signal. He was out. The reaction from the crowd shifted instantly again. Some fans cheered the decision. Others booed loudly. But everyone understood what it meant. The situation had crossed the line from heated to disciplinary. Slowly, the chaos began to settle. Players were separated into their respective sides. Words were still being exchanged, but the physical confrontation started to fade. The umpire crew stood firm near the infield, continuing to point and instruct players back into position. Ohtani finally walked back toward the dugout. This time, there was silence around him. Not because the stadium was quiet. It wasn't. It was still buzzing, still reacting, still processing. But around Ohtani, there was a strange calm. Like the center of the storm had briefly paused. His teammates surrounded him immediately. Not aggressively. Not emotionally. But protectively. A circle of support formed around him as he returned to the bench area. Whatever had been said, whatever had been thrown, whatever had escalated the situation, it had now become bigger than a single at-bat or a single inning. It had become a statement game. Meanwhile, across the field, the Rockies' dugout was still visibly tense. Coaches argued among themselves. Players looked frustrated, some pointing back toward the field, others shaking their heads. The strategy that may have been meant to unsettle Ohtani had now unsettled the entire game, and possibly the entire organization. The umpires gathered near the infield again, discussing penalties. Replay officials reviewed footage. Security remained on alert. And slowly, piece by piece, order returned. But the atmosphere was not the same. Baseball games can recover from delays. They can recover from rain. From injuries. From long arguments. But they don't easily recover from dugout brawls rooted in escalating tension. Because what lingers isn't the stoppage. It's the emotion that caused it. When play eventually resumed, it was no longer the same contest. Every pitch carried memory. Every at-bat carried residue from what had just happened. Pitchers were more careful. Hitters were more alert. The crowd remained divided between anticipation and disbelief. Ohtani stepped back into focus as the game continued, but the story had already shifted away from statistics. It was no longer about hits or strikeouts. It was about what led to the explosion in the first place. Has the strategy gone wrong? Was it frustration boiling over? Or was it something deeper that simply finally broke at the worst possible moment? No answer came easily. But one thing was clear. Whatever the Rockies attempted to do that night, whether it was intimidation, disruption, or psychological pressure, it had completely collapsed under its own weight. Because instead of gaining control of the game, they lost it. Instead of unsettling Ohtani, they ended up centering the entire incident around him. And instead of quieting the Dodgers, they ignited them. By the end of the night, the scoreboard told only part of the story. The real story was what happened between pitches. Between dugouts. Between tempers. And between two teams that turned a baseball game into something no one inside that stadium would forget anytime soon. And as Ohtani walked off the field later that night, surrounded by teammates and still at the center of every camera lens, one question followed the entire stadium into silence.